Even today, 250,000 families split up each year, affecting the lives of 350,000 children. So says a Daily Telegraph poll. The government statistics for divorce in Britain are a staggering 120,000 couples every year, compared with only 25,000, say, 50 years ago in 1960. The poll in the Telegraph also goes on to say that since the introduction of the Children's Act in 1989, almost a third of children from split families permanently lose contact with their father. 25% of these children are coerced by one of their parents into lying. The Telegraph also reports former Tory leader Ian Duncan Smith as saying that children today are bearing the scars of the divorce boom. He went on to say the family court system is in a mess and needs a complete overhaul. It's an organisation locked in secrecy and deeply unhelpful to both parents and to children. So what's all this got to do with Batman then anyway? Most of us have heard the stories and seen the news footage of desperate fathers dressed up as Batman, scaling the walls of Buckingham Palace and even of family court judges' homes to protest at the way they've been excluded from their children's lives following a family breakup. But why Batman?
Fathers are seen as heroes by their children, unless there is some kind of estrangement or alienation that is set in. So far as correcting injustice is concerned, Batman's always doing that. And in the family law system, there is lots of injustice, there are lots of jokers, there are lots of riddlers.
Ray Barry is a retired civil servant who used to work helping disabled people find jobs. Today he holds a degree in theology and is trained as a priest. He has now set up the Equal Parenting Alliance, which has a mission to support non-custodial parents in court and see changes to family law.
So I'm a spokesman for the group Real Fathers for Justice. I'm also leader of the Equal Parenting Alliance, which is constituted as a political party so that we can put candidates up at general and local elections. But I spend most of my time these days operating as a Mackenzie friend, which is a lay advisor who's permitted to go into court with fathers or mothers who are acting in person without a solicitor. Quite an industry has grown up around dealing with broken families. We have the Family Court Service, then allied to that there is an organisation called CAFCAS, who are the investigators for the family courts. Social services get drawn in and become involved as well. There's an organisation called CAMS, which deal with counselling children who are traumatised by the experience of breakup. The family law system really hasn't caught up with changes in society and in family life. Nowadays, fathers generally do about 30% of childcare and mothers do about 70% of childcare. But I think the simple fact is that the senior judges in this country are old, and they are stuck in a Dickensian time warp in terms of their view that fathers are breadwinners and mothers stay at home and look after the children. They haven't caught up with the reality of the changes within society, and consequently that wrongly influences the decisions that they make. And instead of having equality between parents in the orders that they make, they tend to want to give primary care to mothers and to have fathers with contact orders. Over half of the cases that I deal with as a Mackenzie friend, there is an allegation made against the father of some form of abuse. Either abuse against the child, either physical or sexual abuse of the child, or that he has been violent to the mother in some respect. There is a presumption that if violence is alleged, then it probably took place. And so rather than the principle in law of innocent until proven guilty, the father who's been, in many cases a perfectly good father finds himself with this false allegation made against him. He then has to prove that it's untrue. A father is just as important as a mother in raising a child. The role of mother and father is quite different, and yet both are equally important to the child's future well-being. The evidence for it is to look essentially at what happens when a father isn't there. And when a father's not there, all of the evidence points towards the life chances of that child being much worse. For a start, they are twice as likely to become alcohol or drug dependent. They're between 2 and 3 times as likely to end up in prison by the age of 30. They are far more likely to have mental health problems. Girls in particular are likely to have difficulty forming good solid relationships with men when they grow older. Over the space of 40 to 50 years to one now where 25% of this country's children have no contact at all with their father. When you have a system which at the moment doesn't treat both parents equally after separation, it makes one the resident parent and the other the contact parent, so that one is a first-class parent and the other is a second-class parent, you are creating a weapon for one parent to beat the other over the head with. The new government has announced that legal aid is going to be withdrawn from all family law proceedings and Children Act proceedings in the future, save for instances where domestic violence has been alleged. I think that one very simple remedy that could be put in place is to have a change in the law, a simple change in the statute, have a default position that when parents separate, they remain equally responsible for raising the children. And if they don't agree arrangements between themselves, there is a default position built into the Act that they have alternate weeks each looking after the child. And there is no need to go to court, there is no need to involve CAFCAS, there is no need for this army of agencies that have built up. You have a simple position in law.
Back in 2003, the Early Interventions proposed bill on family law reform was introduced to Parliament by Minister Lord Filkin, following almost 8 years of work carried out by lawyer and writer Oliver Syriacs, a campaigner for family law reform. In spite of the bill's good intentions to encourage litigating separated parents both to share their children's upbringing,
it never became implemented.
The engine of the Early Interventions project is a committee upon which child development specialists and forensic specialists sit. They sit alongside a lead judge. The lead judge signs off their recommendations. Those recommendations become policy in his area, and the policy is put on a notice board of the court, so everybody attending that court knows what's going to happen in that particular case under particular circumstances. That is guidance that nobody has at the moment. Judges have been crying out for this kind of specialist guidance for decades. They most certainly do not get it from CAFCAS. After 10 years of being in existence, CAFCAS still have no training on the 3 basic points which form 99% of their caseload. That is, how much contact children should have to their non-resident parent after family split, under what circumstances it should happen, and how soon it should happen.
So why did the Early Interventions Bill fail?
The Early Interventions project was passed and agreed by Parliament. The money was provided and the relevant authorities were told to set it up and get going with it. Unfortunately, it was given to a civil servant who had a track record of failure. And he passed it from the Ministry of Justice to CAFCAS, which is a rather strange thing to do because it meant that the project was passed for implementation to the very people whose incompetence the project was supposed to cure.
Family law in the UK today seems to default to the mother position. This is something that's been heavily debated amongst pressure groups for reform, and something that Oliver Syriacs' Early Interventions project unfortunately never got to tackle. However, today there's some hope to rekindle this. currently under review by the all-party parliamentary group on family law based at the House of Commons, is a committee chaired by the Right Honourable MP John Hemming, Liberal Democrat. I was invited to their meeting at the House of Commons on shared parenting, panacea or placebo, to hear the points of view of those involved about a possible shared parenting bill that could be introduced by Parliament to stop the default mother parenting we seem to have in Britain today. The meeting was panelled by specialists in law, child welfare and social justice, as well as an audience of representatives from family groups, including Real Fathers for Justice, Families Need Fathers and Parental Alienation help groups. Some of the main points recorded at this meeting. John Hemming explained that the current position in law as he perceived it in relation to contact post-divorce or separation, that the imbalances in the system he felt made the current law ultimately unfair, and the powers assumed by the resident parent or the primary carer, which he explained could lead to a manipulation of contact that was not ultimately in the best interests of the children. On the theme of conflict, Mr. Hemming continued that when communication broke down, the parent whose contact was stopped found that he or she had only one material right, which was to sue for contact. Obviously difficult, obviously expensive. Voicing concerns for a shared parenting bill, Dr. Callan spoke about the work of the Centre for Social Justice. She went on to explain her concerns about a shared parenting bill, explaining it was too presumptuous a tool by virtue of its starting points which focus on shared parenting and shared parenting quantified by amount of time as being in the best interest of the child. She also went on to say that a shared parenting bill was not a viable option for those families in high conflict scenarios. After the meeting ended, there was an opportunity to speak with some of the audience about their work and concerns for the family justice system.
Mothers may seek to exclude the father from their child's lives because they cannot for themselves bear to see the father for their own emotional reasons, therefore placing their own interest before the interest of the child.
HAPA was set up to actually help parents and families and children who are suffering from parental alienation, where effectively one parent is actually removed from the family through the alienation of the child. We also support mothers, fathers, as well as grandparents. Parental alienation is not something that's gender specific. Unfortunately, it is often fathers who are affected most, as it's often difficult for fathers to get contact with the present judicial system. We have many mothers who are actually alienated from their children in the same position, where the relationship is destroyed by the other parents so that the children lose that loving relationship that they have with the mother. The main aspect which happens is where the child doesn't feel they have the emotional permission to love or be with the other parent. Without contact with that parent, that relationship is slowly degraded and destroyed until you end up with a situation of a living bereavement of a parent losing a child and a child losing a parent and the extended family of that parent as well, including aunts, uncles and grandparents. We have potentially 3 to 4% of the population being sociopathic. Often the alienating parent does have a personality disorder of some sort or carrying emotional baggage of their own, which then